bit for other people to join in. And well, I guess that I will just introduce myself. I'm Claudia Contu. I'm a curator and writer based in London, and today I'm taking over this page. This live is part of my takeover, obviously, and today we're going to read this book, The Man with the Compound Eyes. We're gonna have a reading together with my partner and collaborator, Angiet Chen, who is actually connected. Hi, Angiet.
Hello.
This is my partner and collaborator, Angiet. Would you like to introduce yourself a little?
I didn't prepare a self-introduction, to be honest.
Well, you're just my collaborator, okay?
Talk about our relationship and how technology changed our relationship, etc. I didn't expect to be asked about my introduction, but.
And we have bubble tea, right?
Yeah, bubble tea is ready.
So bubble tea is one of the many things that Angiet introduced me to, and there is one of the reasons why I am extremely grateful to her. So I would say let's just get on with the reading, and after the reading we're gonna have a little conversation about our relationship and the misunderstanding within. Obviously we come from different cultures, and also Angiet is my first same-sex relationship, so it's been an opportunity this past 2 years for me to kind of reevaluate things about myself and about love, and I just wanted to share with you guys. This is part 4, chapter 9 of the book The Man with the Compound Eyes by Wu Ming Yi, a Taiwanese author. And
we will choose this book and this chapter after we finish the reading, so just the reading.
Good. So chapter 9, halfway, we're going downstream. I sometimes think I've come full circle and ended up back at the shore. When I was all of 11 months old, Ina, which means mother in Pangcha, brought me along when she left the village and went into town to find work. Ina's man abandoned her and nobody knew where he went. But there wasn't much work in town, so soon Ina took me to Taipei. At first, she had a part-time job as a babysitter. Later, she did a bit of everything, from nursing drooling old folks in the hospital to waving signboards ads for pre-sale apartments. But don't underestimate how much it costs to care for even a little kid. It's really a lot of money. In the end, Ina had no choice but to find work in a karaoke hostess bar. The customers were all old geezers, and she didn't do much with them besides eating peanuts, drinking beer, and shooting. Some fellows would touch her hands, teeth, and ass, and the sly, but that's about it. Later, Ina started living with this old guy called Old Liao. Old Liao was always getting drunk and using her as a punching bag. But by that time, I had already started elementary, and I remember more of what happened. We were living by a creek. There wasn't too much water in the creek. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Yep, at that time we were living by a creek without much water in it. I had left my home village when I was less than a year old, so I had no idea what village life was like. Every time Ina mentioned something about the village, I drew a total blank. I don't know why, but Ina never had any plans to take me back to the village at that time. Sometimes I would hear her talk about a creek by the village, and that because the water in that creek was muddy, they called it makotai. Pale silver flowers bloomed all along the creek we lived by in Taipei. Ina said that if you ignored the buildings in the distance, it looked just like home. So I would often squint and try to see the view of the silver flowers without the buildings behind, thinking to myself maybe this was what home looked like.
有一回，伊娜心血来潮采了当地的芒草心煮汤给我喝。她说，在部落刚生我的时候，一开始的奶水也不够，也采过 Rita 附近的芒草心煮汤给我喝。那时候我还短短的，没有长记忆，不知道为什么，我一喝就觉得跟记忆中只喝过一次的故乡的芒草汤之味并不一样。你一定不相信吧？1岁怎么可能会记得这个味道？但我就是记得，我真的记得。 我们家那时候住的房子是廖仔用废模板盖起来的。廖仔做出工，但也是卡车司机。没事的时候就去桥下等看有没有人要工人，就是有工作就做的那一种人。当然是没工作的日子比较多啦。但听伊娜说是在做伴唱小姐的时候认识廖仔的。在我的印象中，廖仔不喝酒的时候还蛮斯文的，瘦瘦小小，不像是做粗工的。不过他喝了酒就变得难以控制，不管什么事都会把伊娜抓起来打一顿。
At the time, I could not understand why Ina would never fight back. She could have taken him on. We Pancha women are pretty tough, you know. Why did she let him hit her like that? And what was even more of a mystery was why she would get up before dawn the next morning and cook up a meal for him like nothing had happened. It wasn't like Ina couldn't support me on her own. Why did she have to shack up with a guy like that? In those days, if there was something I didn't understand, I would run off and sit on this big rock near the mouth of that creek, the place where it flows into the river, and sing. I would sing songs Ina taught me, songs I heard on TV, songs from CDs classmates lent me, songs from the karaoke. I'm real good at remembering the words, even words I don't understand. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but everyone said I sang real nice, so nice that my voice would make the millet sprout. But the folks living in the temporary tribal village in Taipei didn't plant millet. The only thing growing on the creek bed was silvergrass, and you didn't have to tend silvergrass. It grew rampant, and you could never cut it all down.
小学的时候我都起得很早，因为我喜欢绕远路上学，可能5点多就出门了吧，没有表也都不知道几点。我会用笔在手腕这边画一只表，把那个指针在6点10分的地方。那时候我自以为有一种超能力，就是当同学问我几点，我都能很神准的回答出来，很神准哦，不骗你，真的。那时候我的身体里某个地方好像时间就住在那里，它在里头走来走去，走来走去。那时候我喜欢看隔壁班一个长得高高黑黑叫蜘蛛的男生打篮球，他的手脚很长，动作很有喜感。不过其他打球的时候很帅很认真，真的。我到现在都还受不了认真男人的表情。男人不管胖的、瘦的、高的、矮的，有钱没有钱都没关系。2条眉毛为了不知道什么事情想不通，所以缠得紧紧的，眼睛盯着手边的工作不放。这样的男人最吸引我。我常常看蜘蛛打篮球，一直到晚上6点10分，因为这时候蜘蛛回到家差不多是6点半。他爸最晚只能容忍他6点半以前回到家。觉得快6点10分了，我就会假装看一下表，蜘蛛就会退场，胡乱地用衣服擦一擦汗。我们回家的路有一段是重叠的，蜘蛛会远远地牵着脚踏车跟在我的后面，从来不跟我并排的走，一直走到岔路的时候，我会停下来。蜘蛛牵车从我身旁走过，看着我，然后不好意思地笑一笑，说明天见，然后就回家了。我整天都在等这一段时间，等他笑一笑，然后说明天见。
Ina always worked until 5 in the morning, came home and made breakfast for me before going to sleep. She liked to ask me what time I'd gotten home the previous evening, and I'd always say 6:10. Sometimes I would save the money Ina had left me for dinner and spend it on whitening creams because I thought my skin was too dark. I would eat dinner at one of the neighbors instead. Our neighbors were real nice to me. They'd come and invite me over to eat. That's what it was like. The kids in the neighborhood would run around eating at different houses. I remember that year, a rumor went around that they were paving a riverside bike path or something, and that the village might be torn down. Quite a number of outsiders came to our village saying they wanted to help us fight the government. There was one villager called Dafeng who was really active in the village. He was the city chief we elected. I remember one time he got up on the stage and held the microphone and proclaimed, "Urban renewal is all about renewing us out of our home and house. Isn't that right?" Even standing in front of the stage said, "Right," then he said, "but we are not really afraid of any bulldozer. It's the man behind the wheel that makes it run, right?" Right. So it's the man that scares us, no matter whether he's saying he's here to protect us or to tear our houses down. Because he never tells you why, because he's Han Chinese doesn't mean the same thing as our Aboriginal why, right? Everyone below shouted, right! I still remember his words. Sometimes protesters would come and hold vigils and tell me to go up on stage and sing. When I sang the songs Ina had taught me, everyone would start crying, young and old, their tears dripping down like rain. Several times the government really did cut the water and power and tear down houses in the village. Eventually, some folks moved into the projects the government built. It seemed to me that all those projects never did a bit of good. The government was so big and we were so small, but sometimes they couldn't do anything about us. We would wait until the bulldozer and backhoes had left and go back and rebuild using waste formwork, election posters, corrugated fiberboard, iron sheets, and driftwood. Those houses weren't much to look at, but you could live in them just the same. The folks who lived in them came from many different tribal villages, not all from the Pangcha. Ina said there were many people like her who had run off, not really knowing where they were going to, and stumbled into Taipei without enough money to buy a ticket back home. Ina said, those guys want us to move somewhere else, but where are we supposed to move? We couldn't get used to living in the suffocating apartments in the projects, and some of those Han Chinese landlords would call us savages and look down on us. Old Liao helped Ina rebuild the house in no time flat. That's the only reason I can think of why Ina couldn't bear to leave him.
有一次，大家又回到了溪边重盖房子不久，廖仔回来的时候喝得很醉，把我的伊娜打了一顿。他拿起我放在书架旁边的辞海，打伊娜的头，打她的肩膀。可能是伊娜撞到床上的什么东西流血了，头发都打结在一起，上面都是红红的血。我很生气，我踢了廖仔，因为那一本辞海是我考试考得好，老师送给我的。老师还说，吴春花长大以后说不定可以当老师哦。廖仔竟然就拿那一本辞海往我脸上打，真的很可恶。不过辞海打起来真的很痛，留下一个疤。你看，虽然浅浅的，但是现在还看得见吧？我想那时候可能是因为中文字都很难懂，所以打起来很痛。我到现在唱歌的时候，右边听不太清楚自己的眼睛。那天我第一次听到伊娜哭，伊娜的哭声跟外面的溪水混在一起，好像有两种水在我心上流来流去。
Ina often told me, sometimes I wish I could pretend that the creek we're living by is Makota High, but it isn't really, only seems like it. I thought the creek wasn't a good place to live by, because if you couldn't sleep at night, you would hear the trees and rocks cry. The wind echoed the sound back and forth across the creek, as if it meant to make people's hearts ache.
那天我没睡，翻来翻去睡不好。隔天起了个大早，天还没有全亮，坐到大石头上面唱歌，大概唱了3首歌，太阳才慢慢出来。突然有一群金色的蜻蜓聚在溪头的上头飞，那种蜻蜓长得很像蝴蝶，平时只能看见1只2只，不太常见的。但是那天出现的是一整群，好像要去上学还是要去开会。直到现在我闭上眼睛都可以看到那天那一群蜻蜓每一只眼睛，蜻蜓的眼睛是绿色的。我常想绿色的眼睛看出去是不是都是绿色的。我永远记得那一天上学时，蜘蛛突然出现在身后说，嘿，要上课了。然后他就放慢速度，牵着脚踏车走在我的后面跟我讲话。快到校门口的时候，他赶上我，经过我身边时跑去骑上车说，你刚刚唱歌很好听。然后一溜烟的转到学校宿舍后面的脚踏车停车场去，因为他站起来，所以肩膀一晃一晃，好像可以飞起来一样。他第一次这样跟我说，你刚刚唱歌很好听。我觉得我高兴的快变成一只小鸟了。
That afternoon it started raining, a huge downpour, like someone was hurtling stones down at the iron roofs of our shacks. Ina opened the window and looked out, and the sky was dark at night. At around 3 in the morning, old Liao made a trip back to see us. Looking gloomy, he told Ina, take Hafai to an inn. Ride the scooter. Here's $500. Get your things ready. When you find a place to stay, call me and I'll be right over. What's wrong? Ina asked him. I don't know yet. The rain's been torrential. I'm scared there's gonna be a flood. I just heard them saying on the radio that it won't let up, so I came back right away. I think you'd better go stay somewhere else for now, said old Liao. Well, we'll wait for you and go together, Ina said. No, my buddy Mo will give me a ride on his motorcycle. You go first. By the time the rain was falling the hardest, Ina and I were already safe in an inn downtown. That inn still used thermoses from 50 years ago. Still in soaking wet clothes, we turned on the TV news. The news kept jumping around. We saw our village and a flood coming. Our village was jumping on the screen. It was still raining the next day. Ina took me back to the village on old Liao's scooter. No, I shouldn't say back to the village because the village was gone. It had turned into a huge mud puddle. The rain had ever broken through the embankment to the right, flooding the basements of all of the new high-rises in the area. The water still hadn't receded. Water doesn't care if you're Aboriginal or Han. The police had cordoned off the area, not allowing anyone in. It poured and poured. It was so heavy that the search and rescue team could only get into the full swing on the third day of the storm. They were pulling corpse after corpse out of the sand and mud and from between the rocks, body after body, battered and wrecked. Many had broken bones and some were twisted beyond recognition. You couldn't even tell that was a person. I walked along with Ina. She covered my eyes with her hands, but I kept my eyes open, and through the spaces in her fingers I saw a body all swollen up and wearing spider's clothing. A section of that body's legs had snapped. It had gotten real short, but the shoulders were still intact, and though I'd never leaned my head on those shoulders, I knew them so well. It was like my blood had turned to ice, like vermin were eating my heart from the inside. I cried and cried without making any sound. The rain didn't let up. Villagers remember it rained for all of 10 days. And in all of that time, Ina did not cry a single tear. She kept walking along the creek, telling me, Hafei, we're going downstream. She was stubborn as a wild boar, checking more carefully than the search and rescue team in the cracks in the rocks of the creek and in the flat places. She helped the team find 3 bodies, but all corpses, no survivors. It seems like everyone who'd stayed in the village that day became a corpse, but old Liao was nowhere to be found. Ina said maybe he had drifted somewhere else because he wasn't from the village. She kept walking and walking, and I followed her until I was nearly out of breath. I told her, I don't want to walk no more. I don't want to walk no more. So Ina borrowed the tent from the search and rescue team and let me sleep inside. She went out again and kept walking, and it was real late before she came back to sleep. Early the next morning, she got up and told me again, Hafei, we're going downstream. I remember it was the evening of the 15th day after the rain stopped. Ina woke up in the middle of the night and went outside. I felt her get up, so I woke up too. I could vaguely hear her talking to someone, but who would there be to talk so late at the night in a place like this? I got up the courage to crawl over a corner where the flap was raised enough for me to peek out. I saw someone standing in front of Ina. It was a man. That man was big and tall, and though I couldn't see him clearly, I felt he must be a young man, but he also seemed kind of middle-aged and youthful at the same time. He was just like a shadow, one moment big, the next moment small. I heard them, and they seemed to be talking about something. For a moment, his eyes met mine, and those eyes were, how should I put it? It's hard to say. It was like a tiger, a butterfly, a tree, and a cloud looking at you all at once. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy. I immediately rolled back to my spot and pretended to be asleep, but that man's eyes filled my head. Ina came back in, crying for the first time in weeks. I sat up and asked her what was the matter. She said, Kawas has spoken, come with me. Kawas is the Pangcha language that means ancestral spirit. Ina said, I know where he is. Ina held my hand as he waded into the creek up to our waists and then leaped up onto a big rock and from that rock onto another. The moon wasn't too bright that night, but it was bright enough to see the rocks. If someone had seen us, we would have looked like a pair of ghosts. Ina was sure-footed in the dark, and it was as if she had had a flying squirrel's eyes, no deliberation, no hesitation. Around about sunrise, Ina stood on a boulder, peered into a deep, dark pool, and dove in. I was stunned. Her black hair spread out on the surface of the pool and then plunged like it was a living creature. The hem of her skirt flared out underwater, like a white flower. I stood on the rock crying. Suddenly, I felt a chill. It was raining again, and the raindrops were flowing along my neck and down my back. But come to think of it, the creek was totally quiet while she was under. I don't know how much time had passed when the white flower of my Ina's dress was gathered into the murky depths of her back, and her hair floated back up to the surface. Ina opened her eyes and, gasping for breath, said, I saw Liao, old Liao's face. Ina told me to tell the rescue team where we were with the walkie-talkie they had given us. They were there in no time. Ina told them where to look at, and they pulled old Liao's corpse up. He had gotten trapped deep down in a crack in the rocks. His body was all swollen up like a big wild boar. What time is it? Ina asked. She had forgotten I didn't have a watch. The watch I'd drawn on my wrist said 6:10, so I told her 6:10. I'll never forget the grey sky that morning, like there was a mist over the river valley. And when, even now, telling you this story, I feel like I can't see too clearly, seriously. I thought it was a mist, but actually it was sand. The sun appeared as soon as the rain stopped, and the earth had turned to sand. I took it for mist, but if you walked through, it would scratch your face. Ina walked up the shore without speaking. I found it hard to keep up, and for a time I couldn't see her at all. I felt like I was the only one left in the whole entire world.
哈丽丝喝了一口咖啡，杯子空了。她看着哈凡，突然觉得自己懂了以前读过的一些小说的样子。哈凡走到吧台，再替他倒了一杯，想想随即又抢了过来，说：“喝太多咖啡不好，我换酒给你。”阿丽丝被哈凡逗得苦笑了起来。
Hafei said, sometimes I think Ina didn't take anything with her when she left the village because she thought it was safer to bring nothing, not even love. That was the first time I understood how you can still love a person who beats you up all the time. Maybe Hafei said this not to Alice but to herself as a conclusion she had reached about her, Ina as she remembered her. Alice nodded, not because she agreed with what Hafei had just said, but rather because of something that had just occurred to her, a new conception of life, that life doesn't allow you any preconceptions. Most of the time, you just have to accept what life throws at you, kind of like walking into a restaurant where the owner dictates what you're having for dinner. Looking down, Alice saw Hefei's feet for the very first time. Hefei usually wore sneakers or boots, but not when she was walking out of bed in the middle of the night, obviously. Now she was wearing slippers that exposed her toes. Her big toes seemed to be split in two, giving each foot an extra little big toe, a size smaller than a regular big toe. Alice looked away to avoid awkwardness, only to find the window covered in moths. Moths of all different colors, many of them with eye spots of different shapes and sizes on their wings. It was as if they were staring at something. Right then, she could almost see something out on the ocean, something approaching the coast, heading their way.
Okay.
Done. So that was chapter 9 of this book, The Man with the Compound Eyes by Wu Ming Yi. And the book we just read is one of the titles that Angiet literally threw at me when we started getting back together in March. We've been together on and off since September 2018. And we have been reading books together, especially a lot of queer literature. This book in particular, it's a criticism on the political and environmental issues underlying Taiwanese land and society. But we wish to investigate this book from a queer reading and a queer perspective. Angiet literally brought me into the world of abnormality. She is the first same-sex relations I've ever had. And also we have a long-distance relationship at the moment. And she tore apart basically what my parents had taught me, like being straight, having a certain kind of life, and so on. And the book she first recommended to me was The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. And the book really struck me because it was the first. So for those who don't know, Argonauts is a biographical book about the author and her partner, who is a trans man. And it was the really first time that I encountered literature. Oh, hi. It was the very first time that I encountered a kind of literature that speaks so openly. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Angiet. About queerness and about being different, which I know sounds very such a cliche, but for me it was really eye-opening. And that's when we started reading together, even though we finished the book separately. And then we started reading Ursula Le Guin when she left the UK. That's when reading was not just a leisure activity for us, but became an actual conceptual device for imagining what our individual lives are like across two different locations. Angiet is currently living in Taipei, where she was forced to go back to in 2019 because her visa expired, and I'm in London. So Angiet is at least 4 time zones away from me, and she started a project in Suzhou last year, and then finally relocated to Taipei. Would you tell us a bit more about your experience of this time zone?
Yeah, I think I have been dislocated mentally, physically, since I think the first time when I went to London in 2016, I wouldn't say I was dislocated because I went to London by my will.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was forced to come back to Taiwan because of the oppressive political apparatus, visa expired, I felt dislocated because I was taken away from a place where I could truly be myself, and I was taken away from my friends, from the person I love. So I encountered this kind of dramatic shift of my concept of life and what a world means to me, basically. And then I started working for a VR company, VR art organizations, and I was working across 4 different time zones. So I had to wake up in the middle of night and have meetings with my clients or the organization that we were collaborating with. So it's like sleeping, meeting, working, and go back to sleep. And in the morning, I had work. So yeah,
and then find the time to call me as well.
Well, yeah, but you weren't trying to, having too much conversation with me by that time. And I went to Suzhou again to be dislocated, to where political freedom was not allowed. So I think from 2019, really, my life, conceptually, physically, and also mentally, my world has been teared apart. And I feel like my world is composed of fragmented but radically different elements. So it feels like the village that Harvey and her mom was living. Like they lived in a place in the city of Taipei away from their tribe, and they use those rubbish, and they use those discarded materials to build their home. I feel like my world is like that. Like, they're just like my world is like assemblage of everything, of something that was discarded, of something that I picked it up. So it's quite painful, to be honest. But I think it's also why I got to learn how to decode queer reality that we are going to talk about now here.
Yeah. Well, I guess the reason why we chose this chapter is not because it's a queer reading, because obviously it's not a queer reading. It's not about gender or sexuality. However, it is about dislocation and loss, many different losses. And from the queer literature that you encounter and that Angiet made me encounter, we learn that queerness cannot be disassociated from the profound concepts of loss and reorientation. And the elements in understanding queerness. Oh, what happened? Anyway, okay, I'm just gonna continue until I saw you again in this chat. And what I was gonna say is that this chapter really made us describe and face our relationship as we went through multiple phases of loss. For example, when I told my parents that I was in love with a female, and my relationship with them immediately shifted, and it's not gonna be the same as it used to be anymore, and you need to acknowledge that. But or when Angiet was going back to Taiwan as well, and when soon after this we had a series of breakups, one after the other, because we couldn't quite work out our relationship, and that's painful. That's painful, and that adds up and makes wounds that we're constantly reminded of even now, because we are on a long distance relationship, particularly now that borders are closed due to COVID-19. And I think queerness is more and more being depicted as something fun and joyful and playful, and it's all of those things. But what mainstream media do is they exploit these characteristics and take away that element of emotional, even pathological matter that scrapes the social meaning of queerness. Hi there, non-information. Hi to you. And also sometimes the use that people do of queerness and LGBTQ plus communities is literally just use them to appear good in front of the media. And it's not just corporations, but it's also politics that come into being. And
could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I was just talking about queerness and how it's been used sometimes as a way to appear good by corporations and politicians. And I was wondering how Taiwan, how queerness and LGBT plus communities are perceived in Taiwan.
Okay. Well, it's
and I have a picture here. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to share pictures for you, but I think because my iPhone is too old, so it doesn't allow me to do that.
Oh, it's okay. I will do it.
Okay.
And there's my face on the picture, so you can't really see it. But on the flag that the guy is holding, it says "First in Asia, Taiwan gay marriage," because Taiwan was the first Asian country to legalize gay marriage. Your word.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a Taiwanese, I know, but I need to correct this news because Taiwan is not the first to legalize gay marriage. Taiwan is. it's another country, I think it's in India or in Indonesia, when they recognize gay marriage or partnership, same-sex partnership in Asia. That's way before Taiwan. Okay. But go back to your questions, how Taiwanese society perceive queerness, or how queerness is located or situated in Taiwanese society. I was talking about the idea of queerness with a friend, a Taiwanese friend as well, and then we both agreed that the word queer itself is a very Eurocentric idea. It's very, not Eurocentric, but it's a very white idea.
Yeah.
It's queer study, LGBTQI, those words are essentially developed or invented by the Western scholarship. So I think that kind of explain why when queer, or the concept of queer and the word itself, when it came to Taiwan, it's brought by educated people, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
By people who went to Europe and who received educations from a liberated world, and then they brought back this idea and then tried to kind of, it's like a huge umbrella, and try to categorize everyone who identify themselves as gay, who like same-sex people, who could only have a sexual desire towards another same-sex person under the umbrella. And it's inevitable, I think, from a point of view, that this word, just because how it's introduced to Taiwan by the educated class, by whoever has the financial security, whoever have this privilege to receive Western education. So queerness, from a point of view, is quite closely associated with middle class, politically and economically. Associated with middle class. And for instance, when I got back to Taiwan, I realized it's impossible to afford a queer life that I used to have.
That is so paradoxical, isn't it? Because
when I was in London, it's very accessible. Those places like gay bar or club or pubs, even LGBTQ friendly pubs, they are everywhere, and I could just go to a place where I feel belong to without spend, let's say, £20. It's a lot of money,
Absolutely.
Have also a lot of activities that we could go to that's hosted by community organizations for queer or LGBTQI people. And however, in Taiwan, I feel like it's less easy to navigate an affordable life facility for queer person. And see that flag, like on Claudia's screen, share that flag. Queer same-sex marriage is legalized under Tsai Ing-wen's leadership. And again, as I said, if we trace back how queer as a concept, how it came to Asia, come to Taiwan, it's basically brought by educated class and those who are financially and socioeconomically privileged than other people. So of course, it's inevitable that queer, or those words, got associated with politics as well. And I think what is even more problematic is queer is also I think, for instance, if you are in Taiwan and then you want to appear queer, you need to dress yourself in a certain way. Through your manners, through your behavior, through your look, You're associated with a kind of brand that queer has established in Taiwan. And
it's more
also,
than a lifestyle then, rather than a genuine.
more like a lifestyle that you need to have financial ability in order to afford, instead of a life that's being practiced by genuine embodiments of a queer body. I think. So, and also I think it's very problematic that the fact that queerness is being politically manipulated to divide the society. Like, if you're queer, then you're associated with a certain party, and if you don't support queer, if you don't support queer activism, then you are the pro-China party. And it's very problematic. And I mean, queer theory is not about dividing the society. It's not.
Not at all.
To make allies. So I got really emotional, so I say a lot, but I hope this essentially answered your questions.
I think it definitely does, and I think this was also the reason why we wanted to read this book, right? To say that opening up a bit Taiwanese society and trying to reconnect with queerness into a wider extent. And yes, this chapter has multiple losses and redirections in it. Hafae is from an indigenous community, and then is taken by her mother, Ina, to Taipei. And then their house in Taipei is being scrapped away by a typhoon. And this speaks very closely to us, not just Angiet and us and our long distance relationship, but also to all of us during lockdown. The loss of our familiar reality, the loss of our jobs, our routines, the human touch, the dislocation that occurs every time that we participate to a Zoom meeting or a Skype call with our family. This makes trauma, and it's in a way, it's also a good starting point to invent unusual relationships with technology. Instead of seeing technology as a tool, we see technology as perspectives, as point of view to depart and reorientate ourselves. Like, for example, hello, Litian. Like, for example, Angiet and I had to reorientate ourselves and make something out of this long distance relationship. And we're doing so using technology and using our work as well. So instead of seeing technology as the tool, technology becomes an extension of your limb, really. And reorientation is the starting point for both word making and queerness. You have to change your perspective if you want to acknowledge a queer perspective, or if you want to make something new that doesn't speak to your heteronormative system of laws that's been guiding you for your whole life, basically. So we don't think of technology, just to make things clear, we don't think about technology just merely as Skype or Zoom or whatever, even though obviously these are the most obvious embodiment of technology as they manifest, and the web as well as it manifests. And I'm just gonna show another image if I have it.
Actually, do you want me to show it on my? I can show it on my laptop. Yeah, because
so these are the most evident manifestation, of course, but if you look at the very etymology of the word technology, which comes from techne and logia, science of craft, it's a craft, it's not a tool. It involves expertise, techniques, skills, methods, and processes to make something or accomplish something. But the focus of this idea is in this process that you take in order to master something. And the etymology, because it's not pointing to a specific result, but it's all about the process in between, really opens up and provides us with a room for bringing the word technology into queer space, and see technology, as I said, as an extension of our limbs. And therefore, I see, for example, writing as a technology in its own right. Angiet, do you want to draw upon these issues and talk a little bit about what you think of this topic?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we were preparing for this, like, when we saw basically, actually, when we read the definition or the etymology of the word technology, I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? Like, because the etymology.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I think that's interesting. Can you hear me?
Could you say that again, because the signal dropped?
Right. I said I think the etymology of the word technology is rather interesting, because although this is the word itself is a noun, but the etymology suggested a lot of verb, which is to use the skill to invent process methods in order to complete, or in order to achieve an end result. So from the etymology of this word, that really struck me is it reminds us the relationship that we need to make with technology. We need to reinvent the relationship with technology on the way, like we cannot just use technology as an end result or a tool to achieve an end result. Etymology reminds us is to reinvent processes, methods, and relationships with technologies. And I want to share an interesting example. It's a story between me and Claudia. So when we just started the long distance relationship, and she refused to Skype with me.
Yeah,
I was like,
true.
dude,
very
you're
true.
in an office and you don't use technology to. She had this concept against using technology in our relationship.
Yeah,
she was so deeply hooked to the heteronormative concept of physical connection, or the physicality of a relationship, always linked to bodies, like very sensual. I'm not implying that sensuality is always physical.
Oh no.
From a very heterosexual normative point of view, it's physical. It's about the body, and like objectifying our bodies in order to satisfy our partner's need. Is that true? So when she said, no, I'm not gonna Skype with you because I hate Skype, because I cannot have your body, I cannot have your physicality, I cannot have your physical presence around me, so I'm not going to Skype with you because that will only make me sad. And that created lots of problems. As well as why we broke up so many times. And I remember I texted something like, most of the time I feel like I'm just chatting with a chatbot named Claudia. I don't know who I'm in love with. I'm confused. I'm lost in relation to you because you refuse to reinvent a relationship with me.
And it's really about recreating, really, because which is what I was saying before when I said that technology can serve for word making, because you have to recreate something and explore every detail of the word, and in the case of our relationship, explore every trace of our relationship and every pattern that we go through whenever we have a fight, for instance, or whenever we are happy with each other. So to create queer words and to understand a queer reality, it takes, you can use that, and it's very creative, I believe, because queer realities, maybe we need to acknowledge for 1 second what I just wanted to, to take this picture off, but I just wanted to just remind us of what are the characteristics of queer realities, queer words, in the sense that they are not self-evident like the heteronormative word. So their meanings need to be found, they need to be understood, and they are weak signals. They are made weak signals because they float around heteronormativity and strict rules and those apparatus that one has to stick to in order to be socially accepted. And they are uncomfortable, like a paper cut. Because it was uncomfortable going through all of this, and they entail a great potential for word making and create new meanings and re-engage with technology.
Yeah, I'm just typing down the qualities of queer reality that we want to share with our audience.
Yes, yes, please. And by the way, I didn't say this, but if you guys have any questions, please send me a question. There's a button for doing that, and we're more than happy to answer your questions. So I guess that by saying these, we're not suggesting that there are two realities. One is the queer reality, one is the heteronormative reality, because of course it's a spectrum of many things. I don't necessarily think of myself as being 100% queer, because that would neglect my experience as a person born and raised in a lower middle class family in the middle of nowhere in Italy, who has received a Christian education. And that's not the point. The point is not to nullify these things. It's to use both to access something different. And because the world really is an assemblage of things, right? So the reading of this work by Wu Ming Yi is actually to present a possibility of queerness in an artwork or in a fiction that wouldn't otherwise be associated with queer theory, but is there. Because we need to make allies by the end of the day, right? And so let's do it. You finished typing?
Yeah, I typed down the qualities, the realities.
Yeah, that's great. And also, I think throughout the pandemic and this coming into terms with our dislocation and with this array of new ways of being together, Angiet and I really decided to take a stance and reorientate our relationship with technology, releasing it from being just a substitute or a replica of in real life experiences. Like, for example, as soon as we went into lockdown, museums and art institutions, they started exploiting social media with their programs and podcasts and everything. And it was like an avalanche of things coming into us, spectators, public, who were already trying to deal with this pandemic. And we received this incredible amount of content all of a sudden. But the way they made these programs, I feel like it's the same as the way they would make a gallery program. It was just that the online was the only portal they had to speak to people, and so it became an alternative to the real life event in the gallery. But people were not interested. I wasn't interested. Angiet wasn't interested. My friends weren't interested, and we're all art people, so it's not like we don't like art. We do like art a lot.
Yeah, I think there's the fact that, sorry, I'm still chewing bubbles. I think the problems that we are talking about here is mainly coming from the perspective. Again, it's a problem of perspective that those museums and galleries that they're content bombing everybody online. It's because still haven't shift their mindset to really think about, okay, so what could be the qualities of digital? What could be the quality of online space? So they're basically just replicating a experience that could have been experienced in a physical location and then move it entirely to online, either through VR headset or creating a lot of pages online and put something called online exhibition. But it's just only, basically it's from a point of view, there's no difference from online exhibition that they're doing with an online profile or portfolio.
And sorry to interrupt you. We have only 1 minute and a half left, and we have a question. Shall we answer the question? I'm going to ask you the question. The question is, are feminism and queer movement linked, or do they belong to different realities?
Are feminism and queer what? Sorry, can you?
Are feminism and queer movement linked? Like, are they linked to each other?
You mean hard science, hard feminism, or R?
R feminism.
I think they are allies. You know, you can see, I think in 2017 or 2018 in the Gay Pride in London, we have right-wing feminists against trans women.
Yeah.
And I would never forget about this, which is it's right-wing religious feminists. They held signage. I think it's I don't remember if it's in Trafalgar Square or somewhere around. Okay, so the question was whether feminism is the same as queerism, right? Or queer activism. I used the example of what happened in the Gay Pride in London, and there were far-right, hard-right feminists who against the life of the trans women. They don't think trans are women. But I think that the most important thing here is why discovering queer reality is so important, because you will hear so many voices in your life around heterosexuality or heteronormativity, and people will try to use a lot of different categories in order to separate themselves from heteronormativity.
Yeah.
And my point is, we have already enough of categories, please.
The LGBTQ keeps going, adding letters and adding another letter.
Yeah,
but
stop. Try to not to add more labels on ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
The only thing that's clear for us is we are so different from what's believed by heteronormative world, and then we need to try to find allies, because otherwise we will never be able to change things, I think.
Yeah.
To truly change things, because like the way people use technology is still linked to how the world predominantly utilize technologies.
Yeah. We also have another question from Victoria. What is your favorite myth?
Huh?
What is your favorite myth?
Myth.
I feel like
you're a better person.
Mythology, I'm a sucker for it. Yeah. You know what? It's not a myth, but it's actually a book. And I know you asked for a myth, but I feel like sometimes, especially contemporary authors, and especially in science fiction, I think Angiet knows where I'm going already, but they have this quality of creating new myths and new mythologies, which is incredible because we know mythology for being something from the past that brings us some values, like, for example, Hercules being the great man who went through all the 10, or I don't remember how many challenges, and won, and he was the strongest. But now those categories don't really fit with us anymore. So I believe that contemporary writers are actually the best ones at making new myths. And my favorite, where's that book? My favorite is this one, The Left Hand of Darkness. So The Left Hand of Darkness is a book by Ursula Le Guin, and it was a book that Angiet and I read together, if I'm not mistaken. Or did we I think we read part of it together and then part of it separately, whatever. And
Yeah, because
what?
Because we broke up back at the time.
Because we broke up. Yeah. And so it's about two people finding each other on a foreign world, and they find themselves having to make a journey together. They don't know anything about each other. They only know some general things. They come from two different races. So they had different ethnicities, and they need to learn how to cohabit together, how to collaborate, and what they have in common, what they don't have in common. And as they develop this journey, 800 miles on the ice, they develop a relationship, they develop love. And one of them is a human, right? It's a human or a human-like ethnicity, something like that. And as they develop this path, as they reach the end of the novel, they develop friendship and then love, and it's just heartbreaking, really. This novel is heartbreaking, and it's my favorite ever because it reminded me of Angiet and I so much. And also I love it because Ursula Le Guin really was a genius, and she doesn't just tells you a story and make the book about what you think that the story is gonna be like, because Ursula Le Guin is a lawfully neutral writer. This means that she creates laws, and all the characters of the books adhere to the laws of the world that they are into. So if a character has to die, they die. Even if he's your favorite character. No spoilers. But yeah, this is my favorite, I would say. And thank you for the questions, Vicky. I think we have, if there are no more questions, even though people, please ask us questions, because I think I feel like this is very fun and also useful for us to conceptualize a little bit of what we're doing here. Otherwise, we could just wrap up and tell something about what we are gonna do moving forward as professionals, not just as lovers, because we are also collaborators. And so we would like to share with you a little bit of what we're gonna do next. So if there are no questions, this is your last chance to ask questions.
Okay.
So I think we can go.
Yeah, because we already exist the time that we are given.
We already exceeded an hour and 15 minutes already.
Right. So in the previous hour, we have read a chapter from The Man with the Compound Eyes, written by a Taiwanese novelist Wu Ming Yi, and I believe Claudia already mentioned that this attempt was to create a queer reading of this novel, right? And then we were trying to discover queer realities by engaging with a novel that otherwise would not be considered in relation to queer theories. And this is actually our attempt trying to make allies or try to find foundations where we could find people that would support us, support our as a marginalized group. So what we're going to do in the future is we are actually building a experimental construct called SLANT Projects.
Yeah.
And we already have an Instagram account, so do follow us on SLANT Projects. What we're going to do on SLANT Projects is that we're trying to form a community of people of color, queer. So if you're people of color, or if you're queer, or if you want to be our allies, you're all very welcome to be part of this community.
Absolutely.
And we want, in this community, we want to shift. We want to, through collaborations, exchanges, or research projects, we want to shift our understanding of our own relationship with technology in a wider sense, not just our phone or laptop.
Yeah.
Shift our relationship with technology and see what would be a future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so very exciting for us, and I really have to thank the artists and the others for giving us the opportunity to say something about our work. So yeah, as Angiet said, just follow us if you want to know more, and hopefully we will start with the first program of SLANT projects in September, but the main thing is autumn 2020. So if we're late, don't come at us saying you're late. and because we're also trying to survive with part-time jobs and stuff like that, and this is the reality of working in the arts if you come from a non-privileged background. So thank you, the artists and the others. And thank you, Angiet, for joining me. I think this was incredible. I really loved it. And thank God technology didn't betray us, and this live has gone through. And it's still going. Just a little bit, but that's okay. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. I am going to save this live, so it's going to be available on Instagram TV on this profile. And yeah, thank you. Bye everyone. Bye.
Bye.